Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Jean Cirillo, and today I am co-hosting for Mace in Your Face. He is in Aruba, and it's not even that warm there now. Believe it or not, the trade winds make it nice and cool. He might call and Skype in because my co-host today is Dr. Robert Mittman. He's an allergist and he has a practice in Bayside and Levittown. And he's been practicing for 25 years. We're going to talk today about allergies. We're going to talk about fillers, Botox. We're going to talk about allergic reactions that people sometimes have if they get bad plastic surgery. Bob Mittman, as I know you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us just a couple of sentences about you and your practice?
I've been a practicing allergist for almost 30 years, actually, in Queens and Nassau County. And we've seen numerous, even during my time at University of Cincinnati, training, doing a lot of research in the field of allergy and immunology, and continuing on in the New York area, we've seen a lot of various types of allergic reactions.
You were telling me about an allergic reaction. We are going to talk about allergy shots and everything because I used to get them for a lot of years. However, you were telling me about somebody who went to another country and got a butt implant, but it wasn't anything that would fit with your body. It was some kind of petroleum. What were the side effects, and what did she do to get it reversed?
Well, a lot of actually, it's been known a lot of cases have occurred in Brooklyn, New York. It's not even that they had to fly outside the country. These pseudo nurses would inject petroleum-based oil, just a direct oil. They'd inject silicone, not in an implant form, but actually in the liquid form in the buttocks and other areas, mainly the buttocks it's used to increase the size and shape. What eventually happened was the body, since it's not encased, it's free, and your body is able to recognize it, it becomes a foreign body. And they start having systemic reactions, autoimmune type reactions, and basically destroys their life.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like malpractice. I can't believe that they actually do that in Brooklyn. So you have to be careful who you go to, even in this area, even in the U.S.
Well, generally it's not. It's been found not to be doctors or even licensed nurses. It's generally people who are trying to give a cheap way out and provide this type of service to those who don't want to spend thousands of dollars on actually getting official implants, medical implants, as they could be tens of thousands of dollars depending on what you want.
And I think that they're falsely told that once you get this implant once, that it lasts forever, that you have this big butt size. Why anybody would want that is beyond me, but just like thick eyebrows and thick lips, a big butt has become recently desirable, and people feel that they'll get that one time and they'll have it for life and they won't have to pay a lot of money for it. And then what happens when they get the side effects? Before the show, you told me something about having to go to places like Colombia to get it reversed.
Well, actually, what I was referring to is going back to the initial episode where they had oil actually injected into their buttocks area and it spread around. They actually went to specialists in Colombia to have the oil actually siphoned out and removed out. Most, believe it or not, most of the procedures, cosmetic procedures that are done, and they're done actually very well in Colombia, the ones that are done with true medical physicians in medical facilities there, they have phenomenal technique, and it works really well for those who are looking for a cheaper way to have cosmetic surgery. But you are correct that these implants don't work for many, for extended periods or past extended periods of time. A lot of them either have to be replaced or voluntarily or by means of problems. Sometimes they'll leak, sometimes they'll start hardening up. and they then have to be released, but it's really not a permanent situation by placing an implant.
I can imagine that it wouldn't be. It's interesting because a lot of people have warned against going to places like Latin America, Argentina, Colombia. Now, you're saying Colombia, which was formerly, anyway, the cocaine capital of the world. I wonder if they use that as anesthesia, but that's beside the point. That the facilities are actually pretty good there, and that the doctors are licensed. That's news to me.
Well, specifically, I bring up Colombia as a place that people have gone. I wouldn't...
South America.
Well, Colombia, South America, exactly. Colombia, South America has been known to do fairly good procedures cosmetically. I'm not recommending that patients go down there, but I wouldn't also put it in line with the other South American countries that you mentioned.
Okay. All right. So you're saying you wouldn't put it in line, say, with Latin America, where they don't have to be licensed.
Right. And
Okay.
also the techniques that they have and the quantity of procedures are not the same. So I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone going to Latin America to have any of these procedures done.
Okay. All right. A lot of the time, here, most of the procedures are such that your body will gradually make whatever was put into it disappear in a year or so. So that's why you have to have it redone. But what it is it's a natural-like substance that your body can metabolize, and that's good.
Well, actually, there's various things that we're talking about. If you're talking about the gels and the injectables like Botox and like Restylane, etc.
Radicci, that which is a little more hard.
Those actually are removed or disintegrate or are out of the system, and that's why they have to be redone
By your body.
by your body.
Your metabolism.
Versus the items like implants for the breast, for the buttocks, which are in a encased sac, so that the silicone gel or the saline is not in exposure to your body, so your body can't form any immunological response to it. That's why it becomes a problem when they start to leak. Because then your body
that
then
happened
starts
to Jenny Jones when I used to be on her show, but before that, the way she really got famous with her show was she had breast implants because she was like a AA and she couldn't accept it. She always felt bad about it. Now, if you're a thin person, it makes sense you should have thin breasts also. But anyway, she had these silicone implants, and then she was ice skating, and she punctured one of them, which can happen, in any sport. You can get hit with a ball, and that happens.
Absolutely.
You can get hit with somebody's elbow if you get hit hard enough.
Absolutely,
or just
Jean.
naturally, like you said, it could start to leak, and then it becomes liquid. It's loose now.
Well, it's actually a gel, but yes. And then it becomes a problem.
Do they have anything hypoallergenic for implants?
Well,
like we have hypoallergenic
well, the
makeup.
saline is hypoallergenic.
Does it work?
It works. The problem with saline, and we actually went from silicone to saline, now we're back to silicone again. The problem with saline breast implants, it doesn't have the natural feel that silicone does. It doesn't have the same feel from the outside. If you feel somebody's breast who has silicone, it's more natural versus somebody who has saline.
So you're saying with saline, it feels which is the one that becomes hard?
Well, silicone becomes hard. Any of them.
That's
can
not natural.
No, that's a problem.
Yes.
But that's the issue. If under normal circumstances, if the silicone doesn't become hard, which most of the time it does not, it functions, very properly, and it's a very easy, generally a very easy procedure, and it feels natural. When it hardens,
saline is too soft.
The saline is too soft. You don't have that firmness. You don't have the fullness, consistency that women want when they do a breast implant.
Okay. Oh, now what about the butt implants? People seem to really think that the bigger the better. I disagree. Some of these people couldn't fit in these chairs, and I don't know who it is they're trying to show and what it is they're trying to show. But anyway, for whatever reason, they go. And it's not just something that affects them cosmetically for 6 months to a year. It can literally, in some circumstances, kill them if it's loose.
Absolutely.
What could they do that was safe instead? Is a silicone implant in the butt what you do? Saline implant, or what do you do?
Generally, they're basically doing, implants. Could be silicone, could be other substances, but it's basically the same type of thing right inside the butt. What you don't want to put is go and have a petroleum-based oil injected freely into your butt to save a couple of dollars.
Right. What
That's
about
the
injected
danger.
in? Can it be put into the same plastic or the same container that silicone could be?
Well, essentially, silicone, that's a medical grade product. That's a product that's made, and that's what they use. But what I was explaining prior is that individuals will now just, with a syringe, just siphon out an oil-based product and just start injecting it freely into the buttocks to give it the fullness, and it looks good, but the immunological response, the response that the body has to this foreign substance, because it's permanent, you cannot get rid of it, other than, as I mentioned, there's actually a physician, a surgeon in Colombia who actually has a procedure to start sucking out, like a liposuction, but a little more specific, to identify where the oil is and start sucking it out to get it out of the system.
I know one of the things I heard about, I had just recently gotten fillers for the first time in my life at my age, which is amazing. I have the thick, oily skin that might break out once in a while. It doesn't wrinkle that easily, but when it wrinkles, it wrinkles. And I tend to think and frown a lot, so I had the 11 lines and this, and I didn't want Botox because it is still a toxin, even if it's detoxified. So I had Rejuvenol and Radici, that is more of a grainy white, a little heavier substance, but the idea being that if you put it in the cheek, sometimes it stays in there and it forms a wall-like kind of base where your own collagen can develop. However, they said you can't put that in the 11 lines or near the eyes, for people who want the non-surgical nose jobs that they do now. Because it could, 1 in 1.5 million, go back into the artery that feeds the retina, which could cause blindness, and being as that product is almost impossible to dissolve, unlike some of the other products that you can dissolve pretty easily. They have an antidote if you have to do it. You could be permanently blind.
Absolutely, and people have to be aware of all these normal side, I shouldn't say normal, but side effects that are frequent and those that are infrequent. We've had numerous patients that have come in with rashes, that with blurred vision, with urinary retention, breathing problems, itchiness at the site.
To you as an allergist.
To us as an allergist. And there's been reported cases back in 2004. There was a reported case of actually somebody dying from using an injection of Botox. It did have xylocaine mixed in, which is very common. Xylocaine is a local anesthetic.
Yeah, that sounds harmless. It sounds like Novocaine.
Well, the question really is, but you could also have an allergic reaction to lidocaine. So which one was it that actually caused that death in 2004?
I'll go for the Botox. I'm sorry. I mean, that's the second worst poison in the world.
Absolutely.
Coming from a mixture of food, vegetables, and dirt. That people used to get botulism in those cans of food.
It's the same organism. It's a Clostridium organism, Clostridium botulinum, that produces this, and that's the company actually cultures the Clostridium and
detoxifies it, takes out all the poisoning effect, but leaves in the ability to paralyze a muscle. Right. Like Danny was telling us, he got it for migraines, and even though he has 3 sisters and a girlfriend, he's going to be the guy at all the family gatherings with no wrinkles.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
He's, what is it, 22, and you've got the Botox in the forehead?
And by the way,
medical necessity, he doesn't have to pay for it.
Well, actually, by the next show, he'll be 23. I just want to make that very clear. I want to wish him a happy birthday.
He'll be an old man,
He'll be 22. He's now 21. I think he's going to be
Oh.
22. So actually, you're a little early. He's only 21 right now.
Should we sing happy birthday to him?
If you'd like, I don't think anyone wants to hear my voice.
I don't
but,
think anybody wants to hear my voice on the air either.
And by the way, now that we're on celebrations, I want you to congratulate Eugene. I don't know how many people in the audience are aware of this. I don't know if Mace is aware of this, but
He is.
He is aware of this, that Jean has now been inducted into the Bar Association of California. She passed her bar exam, and I'd like to officially congratulate her and the rest of our audience.
Thank you so much.
You deserve it. It's one of the hardest, from what I've been told by various members of the legal community, it's probably one of the hardest exams
in the country. Yes, they made New York a little bit easier. Your wife, Susan, is a wonderful attorney, Susan Silverman. She took the New York exam years ago when it was still difficult, like the most or one of the most difficult. But in recent years, and I found this with the psychology licensing exam, I don't know about the medical boards, because of the number of foreigners that come in with a degree from another country that then take some courses in New York, but they try to be licensed in this country, they made it a little easier in the sense of comprehension, that the knowledge of English isn't as critical as it might have been before. So essentially, they dropped the curve now, and it's easier to pass a licensing exam in New York than it would have been 20 years ago. New York gets a lot of money from the UN, from the foreign countries, and from the federal government for taking in foreigners.
I was not aware of that.
Yes, and they go to school here at least a year, so that's another way that...
Okay, so they have a means of becoming an attorney.
California, on the other hand, is the only state, I think Alabama will do it, but it's under very restricted terms. California is the only state that really has a lot of online programs, which is what I went into. As a practicing psychologist for 33 years, I certainly wasn't going to go back to law school. And with managed care payments, I couldn't afford it. And I wasn't going to get into debt at this point that I couldn't pay, I'd leave with my heirs with. So I went online. You have to go 4 years. And it's either that or what Kim Kardashian is now doing. You could see she would want to do that because her dad was one of OJ's dream team. And she has to have law office study. She's having law office study for 4 years, which includes some interning in the office, doing work and everything, and then she'll be eligible to take the bar. It will be interesting to see if and when she passes. But if it's good enough for Kim Kardashian, certainly...
it's good enough for you.
Yes, and I'm glad that I'm done with that. I think that's the end of school for my life, unless I decide to go like...
To be a medical school.
Yeah, we have a friend who's going, what is it, to Aruba, to medical school?
Yes, from what I was told, I believe Mace is also down there interviewing in Aruba for medical school.
Oh my gosh, he really wants to be a physician. See, I never wanted to be a physician because science was always my worst subject. When I had to take one science course in college, I took human biology, which didn't include a lab. I was always bad at labs and lab reports. I was much better at the intellectual, the word kind of thing than actually hands-on. And also, I don't have great gross motor coordination or fine motor coordination. And to do anything, you have to be able to do some degree of surgery. And I don't trust my eye-hand
coordination.
Work. Yeah. They say women might be better at surgery, having smaller fingers and everything, and doing fine things like needlepoint. I don't know about that, but there's a lot of very good female plastic surgeons.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So but I never had that talent with the eye-hand ability. So anyway, I can't believe Mace wants to be a physician now.
Well, I was actually pulling your leg on that one.
Oh, you were pulling my leg, huh?
There you go.
Pulling my leg.
Yes,
okay, that's what Mace
I was trying to come up with a reason
why
why
he can't say pulling your leg because then he pulls my leg.
Oh, okay.
Literally.
I figured that would be a good tax deduction for him to claim that he went down there on a basis of a medical school interview.
He's going to listen to this. He's probably, if he's not listening to this in Aruba, and since it's on the internet, you can. He hasn't called in yet to Skype. However, he will probably get the idea if he doesn't have it already. But, you know, one reason Mace said he was glad that he wasn't going to be here when you were going to be here co-hosting in his place.
Yes.
Because he has a fear of needles.
Oh, we've got plenty of needles. I brought my kit. I brought all my testing materials for Mace, and when he gets back, I guess we'll have to just have a guest appearance and do a skin test on him.
He
to
has
find out
allergies.
Well, then this would be a great opportunity on the air.
Danny can verify. Doesn't he have to blow his nose quite a bit on the air, Danny?
It's terrible on my end. I'm always trying to filter it out.
We have to get into my pocketbook because I'm the one that carries the tissues. I have allergies too, and I have the sense to carry tissues. Mace doesn't carry tissues. So I tell Danny, go into my bag, get the tissues, give them to Mace. He puts them here. He puts them in his nose like a bib. You know, he does all sorts of funny things that borderline on being disgusting, but they are funny. And let's face it, it's better than Howard Stern, and he has quite an audience. So, you know, but anyway, he did not want to be here if you brought a needle. There's a dominatrix that eventually will come by and handcuff him, which he's okay with that. I don't like to be restrained, but he doesn't have a problem with that. But God forbid she takes out a razor and wants to shave a little bit of his arm, his face, anything. He has had surgery quite a few times, and he says he's so afraid of being shaved. And they usually use an electric razor.
Absolutely.
But he didn't even want that. He shaves himself before surgery. I said, aren't you afraid of the surgery? You know, the knife, you're not afraid of that? He said, well, I'm asleep. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
But I used to get allergy shots in both my arms. Somebody once accused me of having a husband or a lover that was abusing me. I said, why? He said, look, you got black and blue marks on your arms. I said, no, it's from allergy shots. Oh, come on, he must grab you like that. I mean, this guy was a chiropractor, and he saw it, unfortunately, in a lot of his female patients. Mace does family law, and he deals a lot with abuse or alleged abuse, so he knows about that. But I never heard anybody being able to use allergy shots, the little tiny bumps from that. What do you do when somebody has allergies? Some people are afraid of the shots or the skin test. I found the shots weren't that bad because they go in the muscle.
No, actually they go in the subcutaneous tissue, but
the skin test.
Well, actually, the skin test doesn't even really penetrate deep. It's more or less applying a small amount of a normally harmless substance like a tree pollen or grass pollen that's sterilized, and then it's eventually placed on the arms, on the forearms, and then it's
top layer of the skin.
It's either scratched or it's a little penetrated with a little tiny protrusion on these devices that that we use in the past couple of years.
And it's painless for
it's
all
generally,
it might itch after you have it because if you're allergic
little
to
redness,
the
little
substance.
itching,
Yeah.
but it's not really a needle that we think of. There's no really needle involved in scratch testing. If we go one step further and do an intradermal test, we will use a very tiny needle and just put it like a PPD, just introduce that same sterile compound of a harmless substance like a tree or grass pollen or weed pollen or cat or dog, whatever we want to evaluate the most common allergens, and that's how we're able to identify what somebody is allergic to. Now, alternatively, there is a blood test that is involved. It's usually not preferred by allergists.
How would you get allergies from a blood test?
No. The blood test, we can use the blood test to look for the through something called IgE, which is the body's antibody. We're actually looking to see if the individual is producing these antibodies, and we have to look specifically at, like, once again, to the pollen, to cat, to dog, to
food.
dust.
Wouldn't that be good for food?
You could do it also for food, but actually it's less effective. The blood test is less effective than it is for pollen or aerol allergens versus food. Yeah.
What do you do for food?
Generally, once again, we do the prick test for food.
The minor prick test.
Right. We don't use needles for that. We just put little drops on the skin, which just as it's the surface and sort of penetrate it. And 15 minutes later, you have an answer with the skin test, and it's generally a painless procedure.
In other words, let's say if I'm allergic to corn,
right?
You would put a little drop
it would be on your
of corn syrup, let's say.
Yeah, what it is actually it's corn. It's the protein. In other words, if you buy it commercially or make it, it's basically the corn mashed up, soaked in like a saline type of solution.
So it'll
with glycerin.
penetrate.
No, well, no. It's then spun down, and we take out the liquid, which is the protein portion, sterilize it, and then it's put on,
On the
applied.
top of my
It's applied on
skin.
the top of the skin, and then it's either a device or a scratch material, just so that your body can see it. And then you look at it 15 minutes later, so you're seeing on the skin outside what is going on inside your nose or your throat.
You will actually see that on the skin, even if
Yes.
it's a food that doesn't normally go
Right.
on your skin or even get picked up, that goes into your mouth and your stomach.
That's correct.
Interesting.
See, and the reason
so can you test yourself for that? I'm sure somebody's thinking that out there.
Yeah, well, theoretically, there are certain tests that you can do, but you wouldn't have, obviously, the ability to find a sterile,
The purified
material,
yeah.
nor do you have the device to do it in terms of to yourself. And it probably
Sterile,
would
yeah.
get even more expensive, because to do one test for somebody...
And it's
would-
covered by insurance.
Absolutely.
This is considered a medically necessary
Absolutely.
kind of test.
Most
and treatment.
insurances will cover the procedure. It's been available for years and years, 100 years, and it's been proven to be effective.
I know when I used to get allergy shots, since I was a teenager, it seemed to help a little. I got them like intramuscular.
Actually, yeah, subcutaneous.
Okay. Dust, ragweed, mold spores, trees and grass later on. As the ragweed eased up, the trees and grass seemed to get a little worse. And they also used to then give decontaminated cold vaccines. You know, like the Botox, they depoison it. They would take an active cold vaccine, decontaminate it, and give it to people, different rhinoviruses that actually would help in either getting less of a cold or not getting a cold. But they stopped doing that, supposedly.
Right, because they couldn't prove its efficacy. They didn't really evaluate it, so they really haven't done that in 40 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 30,
Oh.
40 years. But actually receiving
I'm old.
But actually receiving allergy shots does build up your immune system, so you, as a side effect, would get less colds and flus.
I didn't really like what they did, though, because, like, let's say they were so cautious at the hip clinic. You know, sometimes if you don't want to do anything that's going to be malpractice, let's say like shooting somebody's butt with petroleum oil, that's an extreme, and it's crazy. It's nothing a legitimate physician would do. But if you don't want to, sometimes people are too cautious and they hardly do anything, and it doesn't have much of an effect. And I found I was coming every 2 or 3 weeks, which was okay. And then if I missed a week, they'd say, oh, you have to go back, and they would go way back down. And I didn't think that was necessary, because all I ever got were occasional red marks, and that was normally, let's say if I took aspirin, you would bleed a little bit more than normal. So it might be a little more black and blue, and if I didn't put ice or pressure, which I learned to do. But I thought they were too cautious.
Well, obviously that goes by office to office, and not only the office to office, meaning allergy office to allergy office, it's actually the nurse or the physician who's administering.
The nurse gave it.
Yes, and I can tell you that certain practices are very, very cautious. Maybe they had a bad incident, or the actual individual is very frightened of it. And I can understand why you had the issue with feeling that you weren't getting a significant amount of allergen.
Yeah, I wasn't
and you're wasting your time,
frightened of it,
which is a very valid opinion. And from what you're telling me, sounds about right. Generally, missing a shot or two doesn't necessitate going back. Unless,
Otherwise, what's the sense of getting them in the first place?
Well, also, it's always a risk versus benefits. So I can't.
What am I going to do? I'll sneeze a little. I might
Well,
cough. I might
it's
feel
more
a
than that.
little bit. I've never had any worse reaction to anything allergic than that.
Well, generally, you have to go one step further. I mean, in essence, I think what they were really worried about was having something called a systemic reaction, or
Like an
anaphylactic reaction. I think that's why that
Which
person
is highly
was.
unusual.
It is highly unusual. It could be 1 in a million, and as long as the patient stays in the office for 15, 20 minutes, that's usually when it occurs within the first 20
they
or 30
always made you wait a
minutes.
half hour. Yeah.
Right, which is the correct timing, and if you were a good patient, you waited the 30 minutes, because most patients try not to.
I tried to sneak out.
Right. We have to
They
sometimes
catch
have to,
'em.
yeah. And in essence, if the person does do has a reaction in the office or starts having it, an allergist has the appropriate medication to reverse it. We call it a safety net. We give them a little epinephrine, we give them a little Benadryl, we might give them a little prednisone.
Which I carried with me anyway, my
I
allergy
understand
pills,
that,
but
it's
those don't
good.
work that fast.
Right. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, as long as you're in the doctor's office, even if you hit that 1 in a million that you had the allergic reaction, there's an antidote. So it reverses the reaction and you walk out fine. But the idea of allergy shots is it's very similar to psychiatry or psychology that you studied when you do behavioral psychology back in college.
Well, one thing I like about that, I know what you're going to get into, desensitization. I do want to talk about that, but one thing about psychology that I do have to say for anybody who's considering going for therapy, but I mean, this was 40 years ago when I was in my master's program. We were about to work at a day program for psychiatric. They always put, the interns with the most difficult people. But one thing the teacher said is whether you're working with somebody like that or you're working with a regular person with family problems, whatever it is, anxiety, depression, interpersonal, the worst that will happen for a psychologist with the talking cure is that you will have no effect. You might temporarily say something that upsets the person. Temporarily, they might seem to get worse, but they'll very quickly go back to their own level, kind of like water seeks its level. So they'll go back to the way they were before. You're not going to screw anybody up with the talking cure. And I always felt that. And Robin, who we know well, a social worker, my practice partner, she, we always felt the same way. Either it'll help. It might help a little, it might not help at all. That's the worst case scenario, but it's not going to do any damage. You can very rarely say that about anything where you have to touch or be invasive. But however, given our malpractice rates are very low, my chiropractor said, if people call us quacks, but how come our malpractice is so low? My guess is that yours is pretty low too, being an allergist, because you don't have that many serious reactions.
Actually, you're very wise. Allergy has one of the lowest rates of
malpractice
of all medical subspecialties.
It's not dangerous and it could help you one day when you're exposed to some really bad illness to build up your immune system, but it's not going to do any great damage. The worst reaction, like I said, I've ever had, of course, I'm only one person. I know it's funny because when I was a teenager, I used to smoke. I have allergies, but I used to smoke, but I quit smoking. And I never liked the kind of people that would tell everybody to quit smoking. Like mind your own business. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian. But I remember at Jenny Jones and a lot of the television shows, they have what you call a green room where the guests sit. And of course you can't smoke on the set or out, while you're waiting in the back. So a lot of the guests, it was a daytime talk show, would smoke. Just about everybody smoked, chain smoking. So before and after the show, there'd be about 8 people in the green room, and I would follow them in after the show. Sometimes before the show, I have my own green room, but after the show, my job as a show psychologist, besides going on the air, was to see if anybody needed to talk more and to confer with them about follow-up resources after they go back home. I would get in there right after the show, and I was kind of hyped up on adrenaline, excitement, good stress. And all of a sudden, a few times I noticed I was like, and it was like I was having bronchospasms, I think. I realized that because of all the smoke suddenly hitting my lungs, which must have been breathing faster than usual, being as I was excited from the show. And I'd get out of there, I said, my God, how did I ever used to smoke? This really is not good. Even the secondhand, people are allergic to it, but even if you're not, it's a chemical. And what is this doing that you don't feel that intensely? But anyway, that was the most intense, and it got away when I got away from the irritant, and it wasn't killing me. It was just very annoying.
The fact that you had allergies, the smoke became a trigger factor. And that made you even more sensitive to the smoke than the average person without allergies.
I would think so.
And once again, and as we see it, the way healthcare is evolving, allergists are getting more involved with more serious. We've always been involved with asthmatics, but now we're dealing
that
with
could kill you.
It's
unlikely, but it could.
3,500 to 5,000 people die of asthma every year.
My mother died from emphysema, but she said one of the better things is that killed you slowly and very painfully. If you can't breathe, nothing else mattered. But with asthma, you could be fine 1 minute, and the next minute, it's like you have to get that person to a hospital or something
Absolutely.
immediately. They have to have their treatment
So
on hand.
we do-
It's in very severe cases.
We do, allergists do see and are seeing more and more of the severe asthmatics. They're seeing patients who go into anaphylaxis or have these other serious severe reactions. So we do see a lot of patients that are very, very ill and potentially could die.
Well, you talked about the shots, and sometimes, you know what I do now, I don't know, you can tell me maybe if this is good, is I go to the vitamin shop and they have like those little droppers that you put under your tongue of grass and pollen. Use like 10 drops. That's not as good as an allergy shot.
It's not, you see, first of all, it's absolutely not as good. First of all, it's not really controlled. The amount, the quantity, the consistency, it's not pharmacological grade. Also, unless you know specifically what you're allergic to.
Well, I know, in my case.
In your case, you do. You'd have to make a formula of the grass and the trees and the dust
ragweed
mites
and
and
the
whatever
dust
else
mites,
you
yeah.
can theoretically get. Now, you have to trust the manufacturer.
Yes.
And it's not FDA regulated where the quantity and the consistency is there, because it's like, and I don't want to get in too heavily into your field, but if somebody comes into your practice who has a phobia of elevators, you want to desensitize them or do behavioral modification.
You go one floor, you don't go up to the top of
Or
the
you don't
Empire
throw
State
it,
Building.
and it wouldn't benefit you if you bring them into, all of a sudden one day you decide to throw them in the elevator and shoot them upstairs. It would cause more harm than good.
Wait, I have to tell you something. That actually with psychology, sometimes, you don't do that obviously if somebody has a heart condition or something, but if a person is willing, there is a behavioral technique called flooding, where you do throw them in the situation. They have to remain in the situation till the fear gets better. That's the catch. Sometimes it does work, especially if they're in a positive situation in general. So there's some distraction. I think systematic desensitization is better though. You start with the little building. Exactly. Then you go to the second floor. Little by little, it's kind of like you let the patient tell you. We have to depend a lot more on the patient even than you do, the self-report. How do you feel? Is your anxiety a 1, a 5, an 8, a 10, being the highest or the lowest? And little by little, you work them up to it. And I found that's what I did with myself, with learning to swim. When I was 8 years old, I remember in Florida, my parents had the lifeguard teach me, and I didn't want to go in the deep water, and I didn't like putting my head in the water. I still swim a lot with my head out, I use my allergies as an excuse, but I can stay up in water. But anyway, he wanted me to go in the deep water, and like they have water babies now where they throw 6-month-old kids and the child will fall in, go under, and they go up because they don't have any fear of not having their breath or anything. And they will learn to swim that way. And he showed me these little kids that were being thrown in that didn't know any better. One kid was afraid and his father threw him in and said, sink or swim. Even if the kid swam, I think he's going to have fears later on, certainly of his father, if not of the water. But anyway, he said, look, those little kids are going and you're not going and you're a big baby. I mean, now they couldn't say that to a kid. Everything has to be a little safe space. But I was so upset that he called me a big baby. Little by little, in the shallow water, I started teaching myself to swim. Then I had a race with a girl who was about my age, and my father was shocked. He said, wow, you won the swimming race. Then I went to CYO Day Camp, Catholic Youth Organization, and to go out of the shallow water, which was red cap, for the people who couldn't swim, there were tons and tons of kids, and sometimes they put the older kids in with the younger kids, and I was 12 already, ready to get out. 13 was like the end of the ages. And I wanted to go in the deeper water with the blue cap or the white cap. So you had to take a test for the blue cap, and I was afraid because guess what? I had never swam in deep water, and you had to swim in deep water. But this was Crest Haven Country Club. I don't know if they still do it, but they had salt water there. It was terrible for my hair and everything then, but I remember that, I knew something that salt holds you up, and I had 2 friends that were taking the test with me so we could all go into the deep water together. And they said, if you don't take the test, your name is going to be Scaredy from now on, between now and the end of camp, which was like another week. And I remember telling my mother, she said, well, don't worry, it's only another week, almost. And I thought, well, I didn't want my name to be Scaredy. So I'm waiting with the lifeguard, with my 2 friends. And I said to the lifeguard, what should I do? I'm like looking at the water. That's like about 8 feet, and I'm standing there. He says, just get in there. So I just got in there. And I swam across, and then he said, now come back. I came back, and he said, now tread water. I said, well, I don't know how to tread water. He said, just be in the water. This is good for someone who can't swim, and just move your arms and legs, like that's what the babies do. And I did, and I managed to stay up in water. He said, okay, you pass. Both of my friends failed.
Wow.
They passed the next time, but that gave me confidence. And it's the same way with going to a doctor for treatment. With the first time I went for fillers, with going for allergies, there's something about desensitizing yourself and doing it with the patient and with the help of a doctor, directing whatever it is you're doing, whatever you're afraid of or whatever it is you haven't done before.
Well, even people with needle phobias,
Yes.
like the host of this show, and
Yes.
I think that
I told him you were gonna bring the
maybe
needles.
we should think about desensitizing him to needles.
I think that, Danny, what do you think? Danny's our engineer. Danny knows Mace. What do you think? Should we next time bring Dr. Bob and some needles? Because, I'm not a physician. I'm a psychologist, so I can't give needles, but he
we
could.
can talk about the desensitization process, how it relates.
I'm all for it.
You're all
I'm
for
all
it. Danny's all for it.
And
Okay.
I
Hear
think
that,
that I
Mace,
think
if
the
you're in
ratings of
Aruba.
this show will skyrocket.
I'm
as
sure they
as
will.
the as the yelling and the screaming and the faces emerge.
What is this, the reality show where, you'll do anything for ratings? Even
I guess that's what it
terrify
is.
somebody?
Well, a lot of these shows
Yeah.
on television.
Worse than needles.
That's correct.
I'll tell you, one of the reasons that myself and quite a few people I know wouldn't want to audition for Survivor. Now I'm too old, but even at the time when I was doing the talk shows, I kind of thought about it. I was on the borderline. And I thought, you have to eat live bugs and animals. Now, of course, my friend's daughter was going to do it, but then she said, well, that she's a vegetarian, so that's why she couldn't do it. I wouldn't even think to use that excuse. But, there's that real fear of that. But the people who get on there and they see that wheel go by and they pick something and they do what everybody else did, somehow there's the group pressure, which in this case is getting them over a fear. They're really doing something that's harmless. The only difference is we often eat protein, but we kill it first.
Right. We don't see.
Yeah. We're not animals.
know-
Animals, if it moves, you eat it. Humans, if it doesn't move, you eat it.
I'm not a vegetarian, or
No, neither.
but
Yeah.
I've gone into restaurants, especially a lot of Asian restaurants, and you see these lobsters, and you see these crabs, these animal.
I don't like seafood anyway.
Well,
but
they're sitting in
yeah.
these tanks.
I feel
and when
sorry
I
for
look
them.
at them and I see them, and people walk up and they'll point to a lobster or a crab. I want that one. I want this one. And when I look at that, I can't even eat it. I wouldn't even think about ordering a crab or a lobster.
Or exactly. I'm not going to eat Linda the lobster or Larry lobster, when I see them moving around in the tank.
But then again, you go and you order a piece of steak, and you don't think about the fact that
The cow wanted to live too.
Right,
Because
the
they're
cow
not
want-
wheeling the cow out in front of you.
Because they're not. Okay, Danny brought up a wonderful point. They're not bringing the cow out in front of you.
From what I hear, cows are lovely creatures when you actually play with them.
Right, and you can get milk from them without having to hurt them in any
depends.
way. They're helping the rest of the world without being turned into
Well,
a
that's
Big
a
Mac.
dairy cow. There's certain types of cows that are bred for certain things. You have dairy cows, which generally are for milk, and then you have the beef cows that are used for slaughtering.
Good for nothing
How
except
closely are
slaughtering.
bulls related to cows?
Well, bulls are the male version of a cow is the female, a bull is the male. Bull is very nasty,
Wow,
territorial.
I did not know that. I knew it was a steer. I knew the steer. I just thought it was like a different.
No, a bull
subspecies
is
or
a bull
something.
is a male cow.
Wow.
Male, I don't know if that's a correct
So
terminology.
all
A
the
cow
cows
is
are
a
female,
Well,
All the cows are
but
female.
some of them give milk and some of them don't.
That's correct.
I'm
Okay.
Spanish, so of course I know the male bulls is with the matadors with the
Right, the matadors with the
You run with
horns.
the
Yeah.
bulls? You're Spanish. Well, you run with the bulls?
I've never run with the bulls, but maybe one day. Maybe one day. I
You
heard about
will.
an American who got speared in the buttocks. After hearing that, I don't know if it's my kind of rodeo.
Maybe
No
she
pun
just
intended.
had, or he just had a butt implant that they wanted to get rid of. It's probably safer than the butt implant with
That's
petroleum.
correct.
Oh yeah, if you want to
Maybe
get a
it was
butt implant, go to
actually
Spain.
that's probably what happened. that maybe it wasn't really a spear from a cow. Maybe it was a spear from a surgeon who was injecting.
Yeah, they staged it. He just wanted the workers' comp.
There you go.
From Spain.
Uh-huh. Okay. Mace would tell a really dirty joke.
Oh my God! I can just think of everything that he would be saying right now. But
Okay, there is a joke about a bull. Can I tell it?
Go ahead.
Okay, there's a man, he goes into a restaurant and he orders a couple of meatballs, right after the bullfight. And he gets these big, gigantic meatballs, so he says, "Oh, thank you," to the waiter. He eats the meatballs. Next time he gets these big, gigantic meatballs. He eats the meatballs. The next time after the bullfight, he gets the waiter serves him, the same dish, little tiny meatballs. And the man says, to the waiter, "Hey, what happened? Where's my big meatballs?" And the waiter says, "You don't expect the bull to lose all the time." I'm becoming Mace. I mean, that's...
well, somebody has to sit in and keep up that humor.
Right, keep up that humor, right? Anyway, so you're on your computer. You look like there's something you want to talk about.
No, basically, we've had a nice discussion so far, and I'm looking forward to a further discussion. That's actually true.
Well, this is really, we've talked about the fillers and the reactions to them. One thing I did want to ask you, when you were talking about how you see a lot more patients now with asthma than you used to see when you first started practicing, say 30 years ago.
Repeat the question.
Didn't you say that you see a lot more patients now with asthma than you saw when you were training in medical school or when you started to practice 30 years ago?
Yes, absolutely. And allergies.
Allergies,
over the course, and it's very funny. Do you have a question, Danny?
Is that because your business practice grew, or is that just because you think there's a trend where people are becoming more allergic?
No.
Do you mean a percentage-wise?
Actually, it's a combination of both, but the real reason, which is a nationwide
kids aren't exposed to anything. They're kept in a bubble, a safe space.
Is that allergies and asthma has grown exponentially.
I've noticed that. When I went to school, I had a lot of kids had asthma. That was a big thing. My parents really said it wasn't a big thing for them when they went to school.
Right.
Asthma was very scarce.
Absolutely.
Now, it's like almost, some kids, I played sports. So some kids even had sports-induced asthma. I'd never heard of that, but I mean...
It's exercise-induced asthma, correctly. But you could ask anyone, your father's age, Gene, myself, we didn't have a peanut-free table.
Oh, that was ridiculous. On a plane, nobody can eat peanuts because somebody's allergic.
In all the years in school, I could only remember one student in all my years having asthma.
In my elementary, we were not allowed to have peanut. Well, I think it was after third grade. They said no more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
This is unheard of. You could speak to people who are senior to you, and they'll all tell you that this was an unheard of item.
I'm
You're
21. I'm
so
21. I graduated high school in 2015.
Right. Also, if you ever get a chance, in your spare time, I'd like you to watch The Odd Couple.
The Odd Couple. Is that with the...
Felix Unger and...
They still have replays.
That's with the guy who's very messy and the other one...
On Nickelodeon, they would have it.
That's correct. No, it would be on MeTV, maybe.
On MeTV? Okay.
Nickelodeon,
Any nostalgic type channel where they have the honeymooners, they have all the old
I love the honeymooners.
Yeah, I love
the reason.
The
reason I brought that up is when we were children, when we were even about your age, the thought of an allergy was something you hid. In fact, you thought of it as the person's a weakness. That's a good way to phrase it.
Yes.
Felix, who was always criticized, he was the neat freak, but
he had OCD.
He'd go honk, 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 and it was a joke that he had allergies. It was all in his head. It was crazy. It was a deficit. It was a weakness in character. It was not something promoted. All of a sudden, going now about 25, 30 years ago, it became a fashionable thing. Just as big butts became fashionable 10
and
years ago.
And big eyebrows and big lips.
And big eyebrows, big lips. As the tide turns, things that were hidden, even going to a psychologist like Gene, 30, 40 years ago, you hid it. You wouldn't say, I'm going to... Now, I got an appointment with my psychologist tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
My shrink.
My shrink.
Yeah,
Now, this is not something that you would have brought up 20, 30 years ago, you'd say, oh, yeah, I have an appointment. I have a doctor's appointment. I got to be there tomorrow, And it was something that you hid. So both allergies and psychology were out of fashion 30 years ago.
Well, I remember when, even from when I went to elementary school, and that wasn't that long ago, the kids that were, the highly allergic ones that wouldn't go outside for recess, because, at Arrowhead 3 Village, there wasn't much bullying from what at least from what I observed.
You're lucky.
But the kids that definitely were the ones who always had to have special treatment, the ones who had the peanut butter free table, or they had to have special food, they were always, I guess, scrutinized in a way that other students weren't, is if you weren't allergic. And I see what you're saying, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, if you were allergic, you would want to keep that under wraps because, for privacy reasons.
You don't want to be singled out for any reason.
And elementary school is the most type of, if you're going to get ostracized somewhere, it's going to be, it's a jungle there. It's
exactly.
And very funny that you brought that up. In your commentary about 10 minutes ago, you mentioned 3 or 4 items that you'd raise eyebrows now if you brought that incident up with the pool these days.
The lifeguard
the
saying
bullying,
baby,
the bullying, the father. You would have had child protective services at the kid's door.
Exactly.
The person who screamed at you and bullied you, who said that you're a scaredy cat or whatever else I'm going to call you, that was bullying. Any of this.
That was one of the better things that happened.
Bullying is no joke
because I could overcome
nowadays.
it.
They really come down.
You know
on
what it is
bullies.
too. I'm even controlling for age. One thing I have to say about that, and it fits bullying too, but this is about allergies, which is seen as more of a physical thing, whereas bullying is more psychological. And my cousins grew up in Moonachie, New Jersey, the Jersey Meadows. And sometimes I would even get a little ragweed allergy in the city because the wind comes west and it comes from Jersey. But I remember I was 8 years old at that time. That's when everything seemed to come out, psychological, physical. I was in my cousin's pool. It was just an above ground 4-foot pool, and there was chlorine in it. I started feeling like a tickle in my throat and the roof of my mouth, and I honestly thought I got chlorine down my throat or something, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and my nose was itching. I kept thinking it was chlorine, and then finally, I heard something about in the meadows, there's ragweed. We used to go in the meadows and pick blackberries. I hated the mosquitoes, but I didn't think of the weeds. My cousins, on the other hand, all right, they were all blonde, blue-eyed. They were half Ukrainian, as I was, and also half Danish from Denmark. But in Denmark, it's cold. I don't think that there's that many weeds. Maybe there are. I don't know. But they had the mid-American kind of lifestyle. My aunt was very casual. They were gone from 8 in the morning till late at night. Every day they were in the woods playing. None of them had allergies. They got sick once in a while. They stayed home for a few days. That was it. They got all the diseases, which I did too. I mean, the first year of first grade, I got everything because, if you're isolated a lot, you tend to catch whatever's out there. But now the kids aren't exposed to things. And my female chiropractor said the same thing. She grew up near Chicago, but in a suburb, and she was always outside. And her parents weren't on her. Her mother was sick.
Without a doubt, kids are
definitely
inside
so they
more
grew up better
nowadays.
than me. I was jealous that how come I had these allergies and they didn't, and they were strong and I was weak. That was how I always felt.
Absolutely.
Because my aunt always said, "Oh, you kids from the city."
Well,
That's a common thing,
it probably was a combination of the fact, exactly as you stated, the pollen, because there is heavy pollen, and you were very accurate. We blame New Jersey on everything, so I feel bad
I had
about
it here too, but I mean it was very heavy.
And I wouldn't, I'd also say to you that the chlorine itself, not as an allergy.
I swim in chlorine all the time, and it irritates me, but I have to.
That's right.
I have to.
Once again, it's an irritant reaction. People who have allergies, it mimics allergy symptoms. But you're sensitive.
We're sensitive emotionally too.
Perfumes. That's why somebody with allergies walks into Macy's, Bloomingdale's, and they get sprayed with perfumes. They're not allergic to the perfume, but it's an irritant reaction. I just have one clarification for Danny. You had brought up a cow, and I gave you a little bit misinformation. Yeah, a calf becomes a female cow after the first birth. So for it to be a cow is actually defined as a female after the first birth. And a steer, do you know what a steer is?
I couldn't tell you if I...
You were correct that it's a male, but what about it
that
makes it a male?
Is it the horns?
No, something else. Something that... that Mace would have
See, I really am a city
Mace
kid.
would have a field day at this. It's a castrated
So
male.
so a castrated
male-
bull would be considered a steer.
That's correct.
So that's the criteria that would make a steer.
That's correct.
What is it good for? It can't impregnate any cows. It
Does that
can't
make
give
it-
us any milk or
meat,
any meat.
When they
No, it
castrate
can't
it,
give us
does
meat.
It can't. Okay, but it can't give us any Big
Do they
Macs.
also take off the testicles? Like, does it make it less aggressive?
Yes, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's you basically when you castrate.
That's why the man had the
You
big
remove
meatballs.
It's the
penis as well?
testicles that are removed.
I thought
And
castration was removal of the penis. I
no,
No, it isn't.
It's actually the testicles.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
they
they
become-
more
it's-
docile. I'm guessing.
That's exactly it. It's the testicles that secrete the hormone testosterone.
Well, that's
It's-
probably why. That's why people do it with their animals. You know, dogs and.
that's
Neutering them.
Neutering
Yeah, and
them.
aside from them wanting to run away and mate, you know.
That's exactly correct. So they remove the testicles. So
Wow, I learned something today. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. I
welcome.
clarified something. I told
I
you. I
appreciate
told you
that.
that science was my worst subject.
Now would be a
Well,
good time just to
you-
thank our sponsor. Mace.
Yes, you thank
Mace.
our sponsor. You
Yes.
know more about his address
He's,
and
oh,
everything.
he's enjoying it up in an Aruba right now. We're all jealous of him. But Mace Greenfield, you can visit his website at www.macenylaw.com. You can also give him a call at 631-851-5577. And that's Mace H. Greenfield. You could also Google him. And his website, again, is www.macenylaw.com.
And if you happen to have legal issues in Aruba at this point, you could seek him out. Is that correct?
I believe so. If you're in Aruba and you're in trouble, go find Mace.
Wait a minute.
You might
If
find him at the beach.
Aruba is under British rule.
Oh, you know what? You're
so,
right.
yeah, he wouldn't be licensed. I mean, he's licensed in New York. He might be given special permission
Reciprocity.
if it was a U.S.
Reciprocity.
It's not for lawyers, reciprocity. Usually, unless you're given pro hoc vici, I can say it. Maybe I can do it in New York. Unless you're given permission to be on a case or the governor of the state or territory allows you in. But in Aruba, that's English, British.
British.
Yeah, so we don't know.
But
He'd
there
have to be a
is
solicitor.
self-funded
And he'd have to
government.
wear a wig. I always, I said, what if I ever got in trouble in Canada and had to go before the judge and had a lawyer with a wig? What if I were to start cracking up in the court just seeing the person with the wig? Would I be held in contempt?
I wouldn't even blame you, though. Do they really expect to be taken seriously when they look like that?
That's how I felt. It's the first time I saw it. Now I'm used to it. I watch a lot of the British and Australian and Canadian crime shows. But before, when I first saw that, I was like, who is going to respect that? It's very hard to say. You don't say Your Honor, you say my Lord or something.
What is this? That's just.
I think you have to say my.
It's
Our
a-
country wore that wig.
Yeah.
George Washington.
It sounds
but
like Game
George
of
Washington
Thrones is
wore
what
it
you're
when
telling me.
everybody
I
had
think
long
that-
hair because
I
they
think Game
couldn't
of
get
Thrones
haircuts.
is inaccurate. Well,
My
Game of
Lord,
Thrones is a
yeah.
little, my Lord, yeah.
I think you have to call them my Lord.
In what, Game of Thrones?
No. In the
Oh,
courtroom in
England,
Canada.
Oh, I'm sure.
In
Isn't the
England.
Queen still their money? Isn't the money
She's
the
their
Queen on
mother. The
money?
Queen Mother is their mother.
But they don't have any political, official political ties.
Well, they have
No.
Parliament, of course. They have the House of
It's
Commons
totally
and the
separate
House
country,
of Lords.
but they still.
They follow parliamentary
It's a quasi
procedure.
kind of thing, right?
The Crown Court.
Okay.
I know somebody who got in trouble there. I don't know what he did. He won't tell anybody, but he has to go before the Crown. So it must be something pretty serious.
Going before the Crown sounds pretty
Yes,
serious.
the Crown. But they give very lenient sentences. We're really the ones. We're the only Western country that still has the death penalty. Believe it or not.
I think, my personal opinion on that, I think it's wrong. But my personal thing is, I think it's wrong because, you can never actually know if the person's, guilty.
Guilty.
Also,
With DNA now,
we
getting so many
criticize
that are innocent.
countries in the Middle East that kill that.
Well,
I see it as a bargain.
I think it's a good
Yeah,
bargaining chip. I was
There we
just going to
go.
say
Well,
that,
Danny-
that people will then plead guilty to murder or something and
Danny,
save the
actually,
family their
that's-
trial.
Actually, Danny, that's correct. They use it as a threat or a bargaining chip. But let me go now. Now we have all these videotapes of everything. You see the DA presents these videotapes
sometimes it's
of
dead to
people
rights.
seeing them stabbing the
Yeah.
person. Oh, I never did it. I didn't do it. Where's the videotape?
Yeah.
We have it on videotape. You're stabbing them. So if you saw...
We have it on videotape when you're operating it, but you don't operate it,
Yes.
really.
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
you
we
don't
do. We
surgery. Once
actually
in a while
do
you
minor
can.
surgeries,
Okay.
like
Minor surgery.
like
Saving a
skin
life, though, you know.
biopsies and.
Yeah. Okay. So we
you
have
know-
it on videotape that you're using a scalpel, but they're asleep. You know, I hate to. We're having such a great conversation, and you're going to be back next week. We're going to be talking more about these subjects because we have to say goodbye now. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, it's Dr. Robert Mittman, Mittman, in Bayside, Queens, or Levittown in Nassau County. Your
516 allergy.
His Gmail,
516
his Gmail is up
allergy.
there. It's
Okay.
sinusrx@gmail.com, and the phone number 717-423-9300.
No, it's actually 718-423-9300.
Oh, 718. I apologize for that one, Dave.
We got
I'm
it.
sorry, Robert.
All right. That's it.
That wraps another.
That's a wrap. That went fast, didn't it?
Yes.
We had a good time. Yay. You thought you had nothing to say.